Today we are going to be installing longer thermostat housing studs to this A-Series engine. Now, why do we need to do this? Well, because this engine requires a spacer the size of Noah's Ark, this mother trucker right here, to be able to space the thermostat from the cylinder head. Now, why can't we just run this thermostat housing? Well, we could, however, it is going to be touching the alternator and we need to raise it probably a good 2.5 to 3 inches. So that's exactly what that does. This is just something we are going to refit temporarily. I'm gonna get that sandblasted. This block just here, this little outlet, I have no clue what that's for. There's no hole in the middle of it at all here. I would really love to just shave this off and just smooth it over, which I might actually do at work. I'll see if I can put it on the lathe and the grinder and just cut that off, because that really just annoys me. Especially it just sits there and just does nothing. There's no real purpose for it. Actually, before I do that, I might reach out and see with some of you if anyone knows what that is. I was gonna say maybe it's a balance weight, but I doubt it. Please, anyone in the comment section, let me know. So, first thing we need to do is drain the cooling system. So never open the cooling system when it is hot. Wait till it is completely stone cold. So first thing in the morning or last thing in the afternoon at night, like it is at the moment. I think it's about 9 o'clock in time at the time in which I'm filming this. So once you've drained the cooling system and you're happy with it, you can go to the extent of removing, in this case, the alternator. You could remove the radiator if you wanted to, the radiator fan. There's quite a few things. If you're going to be going to this extent, you probably want to run a cooling system flush, or at least removing the radiator and flushing it. Just depends how dirty your cooling system is. If it hasn't been changed for quite some time, it's probably worthwhile not only replacing the thermostat, but also checking the water pump. If you pull the water pump off and it's corroded, it's rusted, you probably need a new one. If it's leaking, shows any signs of wear and tear, just throw it over your shoulder, get a new one. Get the best one that you are able to afford. Otherwise, if you don't, you'll find that you buy cheap parts, you're gonna get a pretty cheap part. Simple as that. It is likely to fail. Once you've drained the cooling system, we're then going to remove the 3 nuts on the top of the thermostat housing. So there's 3 nuts here. You might need to give that a bit of wiggle depending who has sealed it before. It might be something like aviation sealant or Permatex or Sikaflex that's holding it on. So you do need to apply a little bit of pressure to remove that. You can just use a soft like rubber mallet or a dead blow hammer just to give it a couple of taps just to free it up. Once it's free, it'll then come straight off. Check out your thermostat. So you can test it. Well, this one is stuck in there because the person that built this engine probably stuck it in with the thermostat housing gaskets. I'm just going to give this a bit of a tweak with my little pry bar here. Hopefully it'll just pop straight up. If it doesn't, we are going to be in trouble. All right, there we go. Yeah, it's just caked in there. So it's just because of the sealant. When they've applied the sealant, they've put it around the outside and the gasket stuck to it, then it's stuck to the head. So check out your thermostat. You can test your thermostat by looking at the bottom of it. The bottom of this one says 75 degrees. So when it gets to a certain temperature, the thermostat will open. So it will actually lift off the seat of it and it will open. Forget exactly how these work. Being a mechanic, you know, we know that they open at certain temperatures and they close at certain temperatures. But I seem to forget, I think there's a wax pellet inside that heats up, which then pulls the spring down, which then allows the coolant to flow through. From memory, someone please just correct me on that. Yeah, I probably got it wrong. It's been a very, very, very long time since I've looked in how those work. It does have a little relief valve just here. That allows a little bit extra coolant. As the Mini King, John Schmidt, may rest in peace, taught me many, many years ago, get yourself like a little 6mm drill bit and just drill a hole opposite where that is. That will just allow that little bit extra coolant flow through there. So put that in hot water, get yourself a thermometer and work out the temperature of it. So this one is 75 degrees centigrade. Put the temperature gauge in there in hot water, make sure when it gets to 75, this thermostat is opening. If it's still getting higher and higher, it's getting to 80, 85, and it's still not opening, you're gonna have a problem with this. Or if you find that it is sticking, so once the water cools down, it might be at 70 degrees, it's staying slightly open, you are never going to get to operating temperature properly. If it takes ages to open and then it eventually opens, it's probably sticking and is not opening properly. So there is a really easy replacement part that you can do, and there are 2 different thermostat temperatures in which they will open. So depending on what you're doing, make sure you get yourself the right one. Depending where you are in the country, the cooler one will run in hotter climates, the hotter one will run in colder climates. So it kind of works opposite to the way in which you are, depending where you are in the world. So this is a pretty easy step-by-step process. I'm gonna try and do this all in one take, so bear with me. Let's just readjust the camera and let's have a look down in here, what it is exactly that we need to do. If we have a look just down here, we have the 3 studs just here. So what we need to do is get ourselves a UNF 5/16 nut, which at the moment I don't have because I took the original ones off and they are sitting in this basket. What we're going to do is we're going to get 2 of these nuts. I've shown you guys how to do this before and it's a pretty basic yet simple episode. Actually, we are going to be looking at the tensioner for the tensioner for the thermostat. What am I saying? The tensioner for the AC compressor, because we have the new pulley that came today. Woohoo! So we're going to tighten those up. I'm going to quickly grab 2 half-inch spanners and we're going to use the old spanner trick. So we're going to hold one and we are going to tension the other one against it. So you want to be tightening them. So stopping the one below from turning, but then also turning the one at the top to make sure that it locks against it. Once they've locked against it, you can then go ahead and remove the stud. So this is going to be quite, I wouldn't say difficult. It's just going to be a little bit funky to do because we've got everything together. This is usually quite an easy job because, oh, there we go. When you do this, it's often with less hassle there. So that actually came out quite easily, which is fabulous. You do also need to be aware as well that where the thermostat studs go into the head, sometimes they can go too far through and then you can do damage to it. So it's not so much the fact that it goes through the head, but if it does, or if it goes through the coolant, you can have coolant leaking out through the studs. So it is important to make sure that you use some Loctite on these bolts, and that way once it's in, it'll be there for good, or at least until the next time you remove it. This is also something that as you go along and you're doing these sort of repairs, you find stuff that looks pretty average, just replace it. There's no point not. If you find that the studs snap, it won't come out, you're probably best to start looking into ways to remove it. So you can do that a couple of different ways. The easiest way is to call a thread repairer. They will come out and drill it out for you and replace it with the correct ones. You can use the 2 nut method like we're doing here. Alternatively, you could drill and hope to God that it comes out. Sometimes easy outs are a really good tool to use. Other times they just become much of a hindrance. Whoops. And they don't always work. I was known as Sex Fingers when I was an apprentice because everything I touched, I So when you destroy as much stuff as what I did as an apprentice, not to say that everything I touched I just destroyed, I essentially got pretty good at learning how to replace things without my boss, which was my foreman at the time, knowing. So I pretty much went, yep, you know, oh, that's not even tight. That is really disappointing. Sorry, engine builder, but that is disappointing. Yeah, enough said. So yeah, I got pretty good at fixing things without my boss knowing because I didn't want to get in trouble. So I went, you know what, YOLO, let's just work out how to do this. Bought all the tools and equipment I needed and learnt how to do this sort of thing on the fly. So next step, we are going to grab the razor blade and we're going to clean down the surface. Now make sure whenever you do something like this and you are using, oh, I'll just try and find where I put my razor blade. When you are using components like this that do seal together, you do have to make sure that they are 2 clean mating surfaces. So if we were to throw this in just like that, you'd find that because of all the grit, debris, crap, old silicone that's there, it's not going to seal properly, therefore it's going to leak. You want everything to be as smooth and as flush as possible, so that way you have the best chance of something like this sealing, especially when it is coolant and or oil. So you can do this many different ways. I'm just going to be using a razor blade. This head is a 12G940. I'm starting to learn a little bit more about cylinder heads and what it makes to make power. So on a future episode, we are going to be doing some work to Grace in which I'm going to be discussing some modifications we're going to be doing. And if you haven't already, go buy yourself the book, David Vizard's Tuning the A-Series Engine. That's got some really good detailed information about it, and just by looking at it and, you know, speaking to people who've read it, you can essentially build and win races using that book, which is a really good formula and way to learn how to do things. I just started tuning a vehicle that had twin SUs in it, and I found it was super handy and super useful. And not that the videos on YouTube weren't, but I did find that it gave me a little bit more clarity on how to do particular things. And because this head has been painted as well, I generally probably wouldn't paint the surface in which that's going to be mating, just that way you can ensure that there are two even surfaces that are going to be touching. You can always just use a bit of silicone or, as I said, a bit of aviation sealant, but the risk that you run is that if you paint something and then you try and seal against it, if it doesn't seal, it'll likely be because of the paint. So just keep that in mind when you're doing these sort of things. Now, I believe from memory, these are 3-inch studs that go on this application. Now, the reason why they're 3-inch is because of the spacer. If you do run a spacer between the thermostat and the cylinder head, you do need to run the longer style studs. So if that's the case, then make sure you buy the right ones. Now, yes, there is a little bit of crap going inside the top of the engine. I'll get my vacuum later once we pull everything out. I'm not going to seal this just yet. I'm just going to leave it for now, and then we're going to come back and clean it up. So essentially, the thermostat housing studs have 2 different threads on them. So down the bottom where my thumb is, just here, we have a coarse thread. So this is a UNC. So UNC is imperial and C is coarse. Up here we have UNF. So UNF means it is a imperial thread and the F is a fine thread. Well, that's how I remember it anyway. And if I'm wrong, please someone correct me for being wrong on that. So what we're going to do first is we're going to grab some Loctite. Now, particularly the Loctite I'm going to be using is pipe sealant. This is designed for sealing pipes from, you know, coolant and water and stuff, and this is one of the best things I'd use. If not, you can just use red Loctite. I use this on a lot of like airline fittings and stuff when I'm doing stuff like with pneumatic tools. Now what we want to do is just wire that in by hand to begin with. So never ever just jump on a rattle gun and just send it, because you'll find you'll likely destroy it. All right, so just grab my torch. It's just being a little bit funky. So what I'm going to do is just wind on the 2 nuts. I'm not going to do them up tight. We're just going to put it on there like that. I'm going to stick it here, just get it started. I think there's probably just a bit of paint in there. I'm not really sure why it's doing that to me when it came out fine. But let's grab my 1/2-inch ratchet, or ratchet spanner, should I say. And we're just going to try and line that up to where it just starts to bite, and then we should be fine. Send that through, and it'll just bite all the way in. I'm just going to try one of the other studs, because maybe somehow I've got that wrong. No. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a tap, or at least a rethread tap. I'm going to just run it through there just to get it started, to make sure that we can ensure it's going to go in properly. All right, so here I'm just using a 11mm socket and my world's biggest 1/4-inch ratchet. So we're just going to find the right angle and then just drive that in just to clean it up, and then wind it back off. And then do the same thing again, just in each hole, just to clean it out and to make sure that we can get the studs started in there. All right, take 2. Let's give this a shot. All right, so we're just gonna wind those in. Once again, just put a little bit of Loctite on the bottom of it, and we're just gonna do it up until it stops, then just give it a bit of a nip. Now, what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna nip both of these nuts up opposing each other once again, so that way we can lock it in. Once it's locked in, we can then go and use the top one to wind it down until it comes to a stop. And you probably can't see, but there is a little bit of sealant starting to come out from where it's just squished. What we're going to do is, once we're tight, Yep, that's perfect. We are just going to grab a rag and we're going to clean it. So repeat the same process and refit the new studs to the other holes. All right, so once everything is in and it's all tight, just grab yourself a rag and just wipe off the excess sealant you've got on the threads, just to make sure that there's nothing hanging out. So we are up to the point now in which we can throw the thermostat in. Now, at this stage, it's probably not overly important that we need it in there, but we're going to throw it in there anyway. Only because I'm not going to be sealing everything just yet. The head actually has a recess as well for the thermostat. So obviously there's a gasket that's going to go between there, which we'll come back and put on later. I just don't want to do it until we've got all of this mocked up and we're happy with it. And then once we're happy with it, I'll get this sandblasted and then we'll put it back together. Once that's on, we're then going to grab the outlet. Yeah, so it looks like it's a bit excessive at the moment, but hashtag she'll be right. And then let's just put a couple of nuts on there. And it does have a washer as well that needs to go between there. Some as well, like Grace with her 1098, runs a steady bar that actually mounts below this and goes to the firewall. So you can also lift that up a little bit further. This does probably have a good inch of bolt sticking out of it, or thread should I say, but she'll be fine. And we also have another top radiator hose. So make sure you check those as well while you're there, because you will find over time the hoses do wear as well as the clamps. If you ever find that, let's just get this adjusted. If you ever find that when you are removing a radiator hose and it's got a bit of crustation around either end of the hose, you pull it off, it feels like it's crumbling in your hand. That's a really good indication to know that the hose has let go and you do need to replace it. Whenever you replace hoses, replace the clamps at the same time. Over time, the clamps wear, they lose spring tension, and it also just helps make it look pretty as well. So let's jump down there and have a look at the tensioner, or the new tensioner for the air conditioning. All right, so as you can see, we have the pulley just here, or at least the shaft to which the pulley is going to run on. So at the moment it's just very hard to get my hand in there and film at the same time, so just bear with me. We're going to remove the nut, we're going to grab the new pulley in which we've got, and then we're going to fit it and just make sure. If that's the case, then we can go ahead and measure, oh, there we go, the belt size. So essentially what we're going to do to measure the belt size is probably just wrap a bit of string around the pulleys, and then from there measure it and get it in a rough sort of, oh, how's that? That is actually perfect. I'm really surprised. Thanks, Trent from Trade Auto Parts. Appreciate you, mate. Sorry, I just got absolutely sidetracked. You want to adjust the tensioner about halfway through. So if we are to tighten this bolt here, it's going to pull the tensioner down, which is going to apply more tension. If we loosen it, it's then going to push it up, which is then going to slacken it off. Now it's probably adjusted to about 1/3, so I'd probably measure it at about this and then add probably about 5 mil onto the belt size. So if it measured at, let's just say 850, I'd probably see if I can get one that's like 855 or 860, because there is going to be more than 10 mil of adjustment in that. And that, oh yes, look at that, that is best. The old pulley as well was absolutely shot. That's why we had to change it. So this one here, oh, nice and smooth, quiet, excellent. I'm gonna get that sandblasted as well. So essentially what I need to do now is this bolt that's up under here, this is actually 38 UNF. That's a UNC bolt, which is really annoying, so I need to get some more 38 bolts. We're going to fit the harmonic balancer. You can just see the snout of the crank just down there where my finger is. And then I think as well, the water pump pulley might need to run 2 pulleys. I'm not entirely sure. No. Yes? No. Yes. Yes. No. Not sure. Anyway, what we'll do is I might look into that, because I think from memory that's going to. Where the pulley sits currently, looks like it runs off there. I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to have a look at this. Right folks, so I've just been to work and the time is now currently about 5 to 9 p.m. Got me Ringer's drink bottle right here. This is the Fit Girl drink bottle, apparently, according to my neighbour Sal. All right, so what I've worked out, I did a bit of research through a couple of my contacts on Instagram and WhatsApp, in the groups that I'm in. And it turns out the alternator is meant to mount directly to the compressor. Now, from what I'm going to assume, it's to do with the position of the mounting brackets for the compressor on the A+ engine. Now, although I don't have an A+ engine here, I do actually have another 1330 A+, which is at the machine shop at the moment, which you'll see later in another episode. That's not to be confused with the Mark III I've got in the background as well. It's meant to mount directly to it, which is cool, but at the moment we've probably got a gap of 30 to 40 mil, so maybe, you know, just shy of 2 inches. I thought to myself this morning, well, why don't we just use something like a crush tube? That's probably going to be the best option. What I'll do is I'll work out where it needs to be, I'll tighten everything up, and then get a pair of vernier calipers in there, measure it, and just trim it roughly to suit. That way, if it's, you know, a couple of mil too big or too small, we can make it work. So that's going to be what I do next. Essentially, the next thing we need to do is I'm just going to nip everything up roughly where it needs to be. We're going to get a bit of string or floss or something and just wrap it around all of the pulleys to work out exactly the length of the belt. Now, what we need to do here is I'm pretty certain this only has a single belt. So like a normal classic Mini, there should be an adjuster for the alternator. But in this case, the alternator is going to mount directly to the compressor, and then below the compressor is going to be the tensioner pulley, which is what it's all going to run off. So the belt size is going to be pretty long. I think from memory, they're like an 850 or 870, maybe a little bit shorter, depending on the style of setup, whether you got a generator or whether you got an alternator. So this is probably going to be about another 100 mil longer, maybe. Might even be like a 13A 1050 or something. I'm not entirely sure. So let's do a couple of measurements and work it out. In the background, I think I might remove the flamethrower HV ignition coil there and see if I can reposition it somewhere so it's kind of out of the way and hidden, and mount the condenser as well. I think it's probably going to be the best bet that I've got to do in terms of trying to get this thing set up. Otherwise, we're going to have to try and find a way to be able to mount the condenser at the front. The guy that's going to be regassing the AC system is going to have that trouble. And that's honestly what you get when you start modifying classic cars. Like, we're looking to get a different evaporator inside the car at the moment. I sent the customer the measurements for it this morning. So hopefully he can get back to me and let me know what we're going to do. Let's throw that belt on and just see how it's going to go, just so we can mock up this sort of area. Once we've done that, we're pretty much on point with where it needs to be. Then I can strip everything back apart, get everything sandblasted, then I can go get it powder coated so it just looks nice. I think we'll just do those brackets in black. There's no point, I think, in doing them yellow. Like, there would be too much yellow, I think, in my opinion anyway. The one thing that the customer did note as well, two things actually, the temperature sensor that sits behind the alternator on the side of the head, that tab, the actual sender itself needs to bend 90 degrees, which is pretty straightforward. And he said to change the plugs in this thing. So number one, it was an absolute pig of a thing because it sits directly behind it. So let's chug along forward. Let's get everything on approximately where it needs to be. And then next scene, you'll see us get a bit of wire or rope or floss or something, and we'll make up a temporary belt and work out the exact length, and then we can send it off to go get made tomorrow. All right, so it's been a monumental week. It took me so long to get this AC system to where it is today, simply because of a bunch of reasons, which I'll talk about shortly. So I spoke to the customer today on the phone. Essentially, he wants to organize a new condenser for it. So the one we've got in there at the moment is quite thick and does take up quite a lot of valuable real estate. Essentially, what we'd need to do is reposition the ignition coil because it's directly behind where the fan would sit, which then means it's going to be shrouded. If we have the ignition coil there, it'll probably be okay, but it is mounted on a fairly decent size mount, which then means we're gonna have to relocate it. So we relocate that. We then have to look at the turbo inlet. So at the moment, we just have a pod filter sticking on the back, which would probably be okay. But once again, we have the fan that mounts on the back of it. Now, the fan is about the same width as the condenser at the moment. So the condenser and the fan takes up probably a good 4 inches of space. So there's a lot of real estate there. And as we all know, in a classic Mini, there's not a lot of space to begin with. If that's the case, then we'd probably have to put like an angled pipe on there and run it down through the inner wing panel on the driver's side, or the right side, or off side, or near side, or whatever it is, wherever you are in the world. But pretty much, this is a right-hand drive car, it's going to have to be on the right-hand side. So, leads me to my next point. We're going to run a new condenser. I'm going to send him the measurements tonight, and he's going to organise those, and then that way we can plumb it. We can have everything there, and just the line that runs from the condenser back to the compressor and inside the cabin, we can get those plumbed and just made separately. You do also need to run a new receiver dryer, which we're going to replace as well. If we don't replace it, at least then the electrician or the AC guy can do it. Not only that, but there was a lot of fan-doogling around with the alternator to try to get it to line up. Now, when you have a belt that's running on a system, on a pulley system, for instance, they do need to run true. True means that it needs to run straight, so they need to be in line with each other. Essentially what I found was where the alternator was and where the compressor was, they're on 2 different angles. Now, although you might be able to just get away with it, and by that I mean have a little bit of deflection on a little bit of an angle, it'll probably be okay. But if it's not, it's going to wear out the belt quickly. It's going to squeal. It's going to cause excessive damage to both the belt and other components, and it's probably going to destroy the pulleys as well, or at least the bearings, and it's just going to keep snapping. So what I had to do was machine down the alternator to move it across, so towards the radiator, which then brought it back in line. Once it was in line, that was perfect. It was pretty much running where it needs to be. Where the compressor mounts, the mounting holes on the block, so once again, this being an A series and the previous engine being an A+, the mounting holes are different. So I'm going to get Josh to come around tonight. He's going to make up a bracket. We'll do that off camera, and I'll run it through with you guys in another episode. So that bracket needs to go across and reattach the compressor to the block. Now, not only that, but also because the alternator sits above the compressor, as we all know, it does run a small adjusting mechanism, which I'll show you guys in just 1 second. So just this little banana looking thing here. So that's obviously the original timing case. This is how the alternator mounts. So one will mount to the alternator, so this one here, and then it will slide up and down. So depending where it needs to go, you lift it up to create tension, you lower it down to release the tension. Essentially, the original setup, it pretty much had the alternator mounting directly to the compressor, and then it had a little groove cut out in the side. Similar to that, not as big, but similar. Because once again, this is an A series, not an A+, it sits about 2 inches away, so about 50 mil from it. Now, although I can run a crush tube from the alternator to the bracket that mounts on the compressor, the holes don't line up. So where the groove is, so where this cutout here is, so this one here, this groove cutout, essentially where the bolt would be, it would be sitting, and I'll use my punch as an example, it would be sitting about here. So essentially what that means is we need to fabricate that bracket again, and then move that hole up probably another 10 mil, and then recreate the groove. So once again, Josh is going to come around tonight. He's going to help me work out where we need that to be. I'll take that off. He will just refabricate that, essentially how it mounts to the block. So on the bracket that mounts the compressor to the block, and then that bracket also mounts to the compressor. So there's 2 sides of that block, and then there's another side that it sits on to use the adjuster. Once I'll show you guys what we're doing, it'll make way more sense. So there's a lot of mumbo jumbo jargon here. But yeah, once we've done that, then the AC system is completely plumbed. Now, what I also spoke to him about was leaving all of the wiring for the AC system disconnected until we get it plumbed and everything is in there operational. We can then start working out switches, relays, thermistors or thermometers, thermistor, I think that's the term that they use for it. All the components that we need to be able to do it. If we start running all that now and then we introduce problems, we want that to be its own separate circuit. So essentially we just need power coming in, the solenoid, the relay, etc, the fan, and organise all that. And probably since it was on the road, which I think it was about 3 to 5 years ago at the time of filming, so it's 2025 now, I think it was like late 19s, so let's just say 2019, 2018 was the last time it was properly on the road. So since then, technology's come a little bit further. We might be able to use some different components in it, help it run a little bit more effectively and a little bit more efficiently. So if that's the case, then perfect, we can do that. But I also spoke to him about just doing the mechanical stuff. So we're going to get this car running and driving, and most importantly stopping, but also reassemble all the mechanical parts of the car. So finish off the engine. Once the engine's done, and the exhaust is plumbed, which we just have to weld, which I'm going to get Josh to weld up for me. We're going to run the cam in, so 20 minutes at probably 2,500 RPM. Once it's done that, we're going to run it through its heat cycle, switch it off, leave it, and then he's going to take it from there. He's going to go get it tuned, only because if we keep it idling, we're going to destroy the engine. Essentially, you want to be going between about 50 to 100 k's an hour for probably about up to about 100 k's. Well, you probably even do it in about 50 k's, really, about 50 miles. I think Paul Jeffries told me to do. Essentially, you just want to be going full throttle in probably 4th gear, give it all the berries, get up to about 100 k's an hour, slow down, let the car slow down. Don't just slow down with the brake and just on, off accelerator. So 50 to 100, slow back down, 50 to 100, slow back down. And keep doing that essentially for about 50 miles or, you know, probably 70 to 100 k's. That'll just help bed the engine in. Once you've done that, you do not need to do anything further. Essentially, I don't want to be doing that at the moment because, as you can see, it doesn't have any number plates. This thing needs to be engineered. It needs to be on plates. So someone needs to go through it and give it a good look over, needs to get a blue slip, engineer's report, and then get it registered. That may not happen for another 12 months. So there's no point in me having it here trying to drive this unregistered car, running the risk, unregistered, uninsured, vehicle on the road, and potentially run the risk of crashing it. So we'll get it running, we'll get it started, we'll bed the cam in, which will film the episode, and then after that, once the interior stuff's done, so the mirrors, the glass, the regulators, the other front seat, any other wiring that's in the engine bay is tidied up, done, dusted, which, to be honest, we are almost there at the moment. Once we've done all that, we're then just going to send it off and he's going to finish it. And then we are moving on to Grace. I do also have another head over here. It's a 12G 940, which is going on another 1275 engine build, so another 1330, which will probably aim for about 10 to 1 compression. Essentially, Grace at the moment, I don't know if you've seen on my socials, depends on when this comes out. Essentially, Grace has excessive blow by. The piston rings are absolutely fried. I've blown, I think from memory, 4 or 5 head gaskets in about 8 years, and it just keeps getting worse and worse. And now it's at the point where Sal and myself, so one of my neighbours who's been over before, we went to go for a drive to a Cars and Coffee meet, and unfortunately it was running at the front. Within about 5 minutes there was a puddle of oil about the size of a dinner plate on the ground, and it was consistently dripping. Now it's got too much blow by, so there's too much pressure escaping the cylinder, which I know for a fact, and I'll tell you guys exactly how much compression that had when we do that, but all that pressure is going out is then pushing the oil up through the PCV system, so through the MED timing case. It is actually having to go up about a foot and then loop around and then drip on the ground, so it's got some pretty monumental pressure in there. I think the compression could be too high in the cylinders, or there's got another issue in there, so it could be carburation, compression, timing, or something else. So that's, yeah, we'll work on that. I did speak to Matt Reed and another guy, BMC Whisperer in Melbourne, so they've been helping me out with that, so thank you very much, guys. So yeah, we're gonna have to pull Grace's engine apart, figure out what the hell is going on, and then probably start with a fresh rebuild. It would pretty much just be a freshen up. I was gonna go into depth of doing other stuff, but it's another story. So that's essentially the episode. The next episode, which you'll see, Apprentice Kev is actually coming over after being MIA for about 2 months. We're going to start putting the wing mirrors in, the glass and the window regulators. So thanks for watching. Hope you're enjoying the what am I talking about? Hope you're enjoying the Black Mosquito mini build. This is starting to wrap up the last sort of episodes of it. There's probably still going to be a couple more, but until then, stay COVID safe. Thank you very much for watching. Enjoy the channel. Please consider hitting that like and subscribe button for all of the best classic mini YouTube content I can produce. And if you feel the need, please leave that super thanks, because all of that money that I earn from you guys and anyone contributing will go back into the channel. So thank you very much for watching. Catch you on the next episode of Tomo's Tune-Ups.